So it's actually a wonderful passage with so much practical instruction, but there can also be things that may cause confusion. So I've highlighted a couple of aspects for further discussion. The overall message of the passage, I think, is very apparent. Peter is saying, you are living in a pagan, godless society. You yourselves, as followers of Christ, should be living godly lives. Peter, once again, as a reminder, he's writing to mostly Gentile believers, non Jewish people who don't have the same heightened sensitivity to morality, to the things of the law that the Jewish believers did. And these are people, moreover, who are living away from their homeland. They are not experiencing the comforts of home. They are separated from their native land. So when he tells them, that you're living as foreigners, you're living as exiles, he's addressing them as foreigners and exiles. It's very relatable to them. They are foreigners, they are exiles, but there is also a spiritual meaning to it. We are all foreigners, we are all exiles in the sense that this world is not really our home. If you remember, like I was saying earlier, in the immediate context in which they were living, whether or not they were living in Jerusalem or outside Jerusalem, in the Roman Empire in general, Christians were now being considered as a threat to the unity of the empire. They were being scapegoated. They were becoming soft targets. People were looking for a reason to push them out of society. Now, these Christians, of course, because they were living under the ultimate authority of God, they did not live by the values of the Roman culture. They did not worship the same gods. They did not perform any of the same rites. They did not worship the emperor. There were also a lot of these, the worship of pagan gods was actually embedded in culture. For example, there were these trade guilds. And in order to participate or to be a member of the trade guild, to benefit from, networking with other fellow traders or merchants, you had to perform certain rites. So there were several ways in which they were dislocated from society. So it's very uncomfortable for them. And it is in that context that Peter is telling them that you should live exemplary lives. And then in the next few verses, he talks about submission. He's saying, submit for the Lord's sake to every human authority. Now, we have to keep in mind that that is not a rigid law. It is not submission under all circumstances. It is submission as a principle. It is a good principle. How does it apply to us? We submit to the authorities God has placed over us, whether it is, parents or teachers or elders, or as good citizens, we are law-abiding, we go over and above, we live ethical lives, and we give no cause to others to point to our lives as, being examples of any wrongdoing. That being said, there are instances where what you believe as a Christian may conflict with the values of the culture, in which case you have to choose ultimate allegiance to God, to your God. Peter himself says this. The same Peter who is writing these letters to his readers, in the book of Acts, when he was threatened by the temple authorities, he says, we must obey God rather than human beings. So this is not an inflexible submission to every human authority. Should also remember that we have lived through some times a few years ago, and a time may soon come, even in the West, where, we will have to choose between submitting to a human authority or submitting to Christ, because they're going to be directly opposed to each other. And then Peter says that honor the emperor. Any honor that we show to human authorities is ultimately secondary or its context of application is reverence to God. So you revere God, and because you revere God, you pay honor appropriately. But whatever human authority, whatever laws are in the land, you respect those, and also you pray for the rulers, especially and including the rulers who do not know God, for them to rule wisely, for them to have wisdom, so that you in turn can live peaceful lives. And of course, we should all strive to be model citizens. So I hope that is clear, that it's never, God is not saying that you should bend and bow to every human authority at any cost under all circumstances. Absolutely not. Your ultimate allegiance is to Christ, because remember, these authorities are answerable to Christ. Whether or not they know it, whether or not they publicly acknowledge it, God is the one who has set them up in their positions of authority, and they are going to be accountable to God, answerable to God, if they exploit or take advantage of their positions. So, if you're both ultimately accountable to the same king, then your first allegiance should be to that king. So, that is an important concept, and there will be occasions for us to be reminded of this lesson in the years ahead, within our lifetimes.